Going back to the structure for explaining the different parts of the sutra, we're still in the section that's talking about how to practice the perfection of wisdom on the first two levels of the path, the accumulation and preparation path. And so that discussion is represented by the in the first case by that fourfold distinction that is made in relation to form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not something different from form, and form is not something different from emptiness. So then, in relation to the other four skandhas, right, feeling, conceptions, formations, and consciousness, the sutra doesn't explicitly repeat those four distinctions. It simply says it says, similarly, then those four remaining skandhas are also empty. So, and it doesn't say more than that, but that is an abbreviated reference to that same fourfold formulation. So it says, similarly, feeling, conception, fruition, are also emptiness. Should be, you can unpack it by saying feeling is emptiness. Emptiness is feeling. Emptiness is not something that's different from feelings, and feeling is not something different from emptiness, and so on with all the remaining four skandhas. So then the explanation that was given in relation to form should be understood. It says, Shenshila, Rekpa means the reasoning that was applied to form should be applied also in the same way to the other four kinds, or the other four skandhas, the other four elements of our individual existence. So, then you actually have to then take feeling. So what does it mean when you say feelings? For instance, what is meant by the term that's translated as feeling? And so you have to take the term feeling, and you have to be able to identify in your experience, right, what that term refers to. It refers to specifically the qualitative aspects of our experience. So pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, and neutral feelings. And then those can be physical in nature if they're associated with any of the sensory forms of consciousness, or they can be mental in nature if they are, happiness is mental state of well-being, and sadness is unpleasant mental feeling. And then neutral is when in a state when neither of those two are prominent. So you have to recognize that that's what's being talked about, not just the words, but actually those phenomena that we can identify in our experience. And saying those phenomena then are empty. So they're qualified by emptiness because they do not possess any independent mode of being that represents a real essence. So that's what the first formulation is. And so you have to understand how to make that determination. So that determination is then what needs to be cultivated and meditated on in relation to that aspect of your being. Then you turn it around and you say, emptiness is feeling. So then that means that Rich just explained it to me in a way that the 동반이 초라하고 있으면 소화 동반이 초라하고 있으면 소화 주야디 Ngawang 당신 그거 매원 좋아 소화 동반을 좋아 이게 굉장히 잘할 때는 동반이 다가 동반이 소화기 Ngawang 당신 뭐고 인상 아니 소화기 자체 지도해줘. Okay. So the second one you say that emptiness is So the second formulation, again, in relation to feelings, is then the assertion that the fact that feelings are not self-existent is what allows feelings to actually occur, to be phenomena that are effective, that have some causal impact on our experience, and that are subject to themselves being produced by conditions. So that point was also something that we discussed at length. So the first one is denying the self-existence. The second one is saying that the fact that they lack self-existence is what allows the object to actually present itself to our experience in the way that it does as a functioning entity. 네.
소바디 인장 따위 소화죠. 인장 따위 소화될 노수지 전남 주체기 딱 이제 만예배 라왕에 라왕 가서 라왕 만예게 당신 라왕에 또는 동반이죠. 어디 가서 단데 되는 노수죠.
So then
인장 따위 소화될 노수지 전남 주체를 그 당시에 제가 전에는 라왕 만예배 동반이죠. 어디 노수.
So then the third one is saying that that emptiness is not distinct from form, is saying that now we've identified that the true relative truth aspect of feelings is that they lack any self-existence, and therefore they are mere descriptions, and they are nominal entities only. So that nominal entity that is perceived dualistically as an object of ordinary experience, right, is the relative aspect of feelings. And then the ultimate nature of that relative aspect is its lack of self-existence, its lack of independent existence. So the third formulation is that when we perceive that ultimate nature of those conventional entities, we're not perceiving something that is different, that is fundamentally, or that it exists apart from and is unconnected with that nominal entity. So that lack of self-existence is part and parcel of that nominally existent, then mere appearance, that illusory, relative truth phenomenon that we experience as feelings. Its ultimate nature that is determined by that unique analytical mind that's trying to determine what the ultimate nature of that form is, which is that it lacks self-existence. When it determines that lack of self-existence, it's not determining some quality that it exists separately. It's totally distinct from that nominal entity itself. So the two are of one and the same essential nature. And then the fourth one is
전남 주체기 따뜻한 만예배 라왕 만예배 라왕에 동반이 좋아. 대다 우리 아니 민장 따위기 소화될 노수.
So, and by the same token, it's reversed. Yes, it's saying the reverse of the third formulation, but it's from the point of view of the opposite. So the third formulation, you're taking you're using your focus is on the relative truth entity, and you're saying its ultimate nature is not something that is totally divorced from it. And then in the fourth formulation, you're reversing and you're saying you're taking that ultimate nature that is determined of relative truth objects, something that is realized and something which is ascertained by that unique analytic mind. Then that quality that is that unique reality that one is able to experience, then that doesn't represent something that exists separate and apart from those entities that we experience in our ordinary dualistic state of mind. It's the emptiness of those things. So they are not disconnected from one another, looked at from the reverse point.
그때 시집을 귀신도 아니 귀신도 나가셔도 잘 들어와.
So, and I'm not sure that I'm getting the point across as clearly as would be ideal, but let me just put it into other words and saying that what I'm trying to say is that each one of these formulations is describing a significant experiential quality that can be attained in relation to understanding the ultimate nature of the objects of their points of view almost, but they represent very what should I say, vivid kinds of distinct kinds of understanding that relate to the relationship between relative truth natures and ultimate truth natures. So for now we'll have to leave it at that. No. 이번 주에 통화는 없죠.
통화는 없죠. 통화는 없을 때, 통화는 가는 데 대해서는 쉐리브 대다 최담제 동반이 돼. 신이면 맞게 봐, 망가봐. 지마면 지마대 저하고 가오면봐 오스. 어디 가서 우리 사무이 차원에 제대는 시도와. 어디 인도다 나한테 남다 무슨 자리 쉬고 다단데 남다 무슨 자리 쉬고 그래. 이 인도가 대다로 해놨으나 인도가 공로에게 같이 가서 수다니 부모가 자서와 부모가 자서 지내지 잘와. 자네지 제대로 되는 시기지 중에다 감축제라 다초 탐제라. 되는 자외 돈에 대단초 탐제 동반이 됐어. 다초 탐제 동반이 됐어. 인도가 같이 동반이 가서 봐 그런 그 수동반에 동반이 수수다 동반이 되고 되는 시기에 딱 동반이 같이 동반이 나자가 지어 돈에 동반이 돼서 인도가 나한테 가서 남다른 무슨 나오네 다들 뒤에 사람이 가서 우리 남다 무슨 수로 아니 가서 그래
그렇다고 동반이 신이가
남다 동반이 남다 고르면 무슨 말씀 봐 남다 동반이 동반이 되게 있어요 다 신이 매와 맞게 봐 망가봐 신이 매와 수입이 다 신이 매와 수입이 다 안지 지신이 진다 안에 가서 그래 라나게 신이 그래도 수가 카도라 수가 수수로만 수가 신이 카도 도수로세 다 소소 라나게 신이 와 지신이 있다 간지 메다보다 다음에 와서 수가 되다 아니 와다 되다 간지 되다 매와 수주다 간지 랑시디 매와스 와 되다 랑시 매와 아니 마게 망가봐 제마도 저 어디 되다 딩마디 된 길에 자이즈 가서 나마도 고면바면 남아면 고면바 남아도 자야디 진이고 마게 망가봐 제마면 좋아하면 마스 좋아하면 마스 정말 좋아하면 가와면 와서 했는데 남아다고 아니 가서 우리 참아면
di garsa
남아다고 좋아하면 가와면 생각보다 고면바면 자야 되셔 남아다 고면바면 진이고 마게 망가봐 정말 좋아서 해야지 좋으면 가와면 와서 해야지 좋아하면 정말 좋아서 해야지 남아다고 참아면 어디 답변을 당당 당무디 가서 그래 신이 매가되다 란 신이다 제 신이 되네 나오는 중 매가 제 마게 봐서 일단 타니도 뒤에 있으나 타니도 잡아 있네 다 같이 양식이 마게 봐 아니 마가 봐서 타니도 타니도 몇개 외쳐 되다니는 아니 타니도 가봐 있네 양식이 아니 가야요 그래서 양식 마가 봐 또 다 가야 가고 왔다 뒤에 좀 다도 가야 돼. 당신이 뭐가. 지만 매봤어요. 딱 간지. 지만 매봤어요. 딱 간지. 가서 사실 유목을 쳤던데. 유목을 나서 왔다가 최대나 탐제 간지. 여러 당신이 뭐가. 그래서 지만 매봤어. 지만도 당신이 뭐가. 그래서 Jima Jawa Mavas, Jima Jawa Mavas, Jima Jawa did not Yande Chava, Jimmy to Yande Senate, Yande to do Inaya, Yode or Yene Takaji, Kasu Ramshin, Tamshi Chava, yes. That Chua Kawa was saying that Chua Kawa was saying to Chua, Mavas, Seva Mavas, Kawa Mavas, Zoba Mavas, Seva Mavas saying that when a Kasu Yonuba. Yonubatani has Yonubatani, subject to do any Ramshin is about us. She doesn't say, say you find in a Ramshin is about us. Come members of Namjan should do Yanni Kaje, a Korea Combe, that Zoya Yunea, come members of Ramshingi, Zoya, she can't come member. Ramshin Tatuya, what that means is come member us. But the that and the Chitamata was she did Tumo Nanda was Shizu, Tumu Nanda was Shizu. Tumu Nanda was shared the Tomani, Tomani the Janishiwa, Tomani the Janis, Tumo Nanda was with that, has only Chuju Dumshi, the Shiva, Tanashi, Chuju Dumshi, Dumshi, you said that the Medava Sergeant and Tumu, Nagate Shivas. The Tujan and the Medava, Sergeant and the Duna, Namato, Mikosu, what? 최동식 다음에 봤어야 돼. 도마닉 나도 도마닉 미국에서 시작했고 양해 때문에 시와서 나도 고생합니다. 어디에 시작했다 간제 가서 우리 비시부터 주주들 자요. 다들 다들 저 관심 없으면 남다 고승도 돈을 게다 남 나도만 무슨 도수디 와 네 남다 고승도 돈에 자외 돈에 아니 다 고승도 도수디 시고 했어.
Nanta kosum de la kana di senti tekjengi siapa sorotiro.
Ta tumu mai basu. Ta
tumu mai basu.
Tumu mai basu. Ta tumu mai basu. Ta mo kan kamshi mepati berechata. Kasu
ta tumu senti ne trick domshi.
Chuju dumshi na bishi na chuju na bishi. Ta tadi tomari na shigo wa. Tomari na shigo ta 유리천이 시야 돼, 따뜻한 레몬천이 시야 돼. 가서 우리 그러면 배워봐. 근데 뭐천 시야 돼? 동반이 있어. 뭐 동반이 있어.
So now the second, so we're talking about the main body of the sutra itself is this teaching about emptiness. So we mentioned in the morning class that different parts of the sutra are identified with different levels of path. The section that we just went over is generally associated with practicing it with an understanding, but at the level before you reach direct realization of emptiness. So then the second category, it says Tolam is the path of seeing, the point at which you perceive emptiness directly while in a state of one-pointed concentration on emptiness. And perceive it in a non-dual manner. So this part of the sutra has 8 different descriptive phrases that are indicative of. I assume this is me speaking. I assume that it suggests the idea that once you perceive emptiness directly, then as a result of that, you can recognize that all of these other elements that are how we understand the process of ordinary experience to occur, cause and effect, especially in the sense of the causes that produce samsara condition and the causes that lead us to free ourselves from a samsara condition. So those exist, they exist, but they only exist conventionally. And when you perceive emptiness directly, that becomes particularly evident as a result of it. So there are 8 statements. So it says likewise. Shariputra. Shariputra means in the same way, right? In the same way means in the same way that that Avalokiteshvara described the 5 skandhas as each one individually being empty, and emptiness being something that is not distinct from the conventional nature of each of those 5 skandhas. Then he says, in the same way, all dharmas are also, their true nature is emptiness, right? And so when you say all dharmas, then dharmas are distinguished between those dharmas that are conditioned entities and those dharmas that are unconditioned entities. So the 5 skandhas in particular are a formulation that only refers to conditioned entities, causally produced entities, or if you like, impermanent entities. But there are other qualities, there are other important entities, such as nirvana itself, for instance. Nirvana itself is an uncaused state. Emptiness is a permanent or unconditioned entity. Space is an example of an unconditioned entity. And so there are other formulations besides the 5 skandhas which are inclusive of all entities, not just conditioned entities. So for instance, the 12 so-called ayatanas in Sanskrit, or the 12 bases, or the 12 conditions or external and internal factors that produce consciousness. And then another formulation of the 18 constituents. Those 2 formulations are inclusive of all entities. So this next section starts out by saying all entities, so including the unconditioned entities, are characterized by, first of all, emptiness. And then saying all entities, not just the 5 skandhas, are qualified by emptiness. And that emptiness also is the true nature of all those entities. So it's almost like, in a very shortened form, restating what was said in the previous section. But then there are 7 more qualities that are expressed here besides emptiness. So it says all dharmas are emptiness. Then it says, the second one is they have no essential attribute. Tenyi meva. Then they do not arise. So they do not have any real form of arising. They do not pass away. So the notion of arising and passing away is an essential way of thinking about all impermanent things. All impermanent things generally, as relative truth objects, are thought of as things that arise when the conditions produce them and only last for a moment and then undergo cessation. And so this is saying there's no real arising, there's no real cessation, and then there's no. Then it's saying they are. And we think of, for instance, we think of samsara. Samsara is generally thought of as impure. One of the qualities of samsara is that it's unattractive and it's contaminated by the mental afflictions. It's subject to is the cause of our attachment, and it leads to our suffering condition. And so it is impure. And then so that quality that is thought of as being impure is something that is not real. And then the next quality after that is we think of nirvana as a state of being free of impurity. Vimala means, or jimam tangtrelwa means lacking impurity. So then there is such a thing conventionally as nirvana, and that's considered to be a state of having freed yourself from impurity, but that state itself also is not something that exists by way of some independent or real nature. Then beyond that, there's 2 more, which is to say there is no quality of diminishing, and there's no quality of undergoing development or increase. And those latter 2 sometimes are a little bit unclear. especially to some beginning person, a beginning reader. So these 8 qualities in the commentary, it gives a fairly straightforward presentation. So it says all dharmas, skipping the first one, saying all dharmas are subject to emptiness. That one we have already talked about extensively. The next one is saying that they lack any essential attribute. So then, generally in the Abhidharma, then things are said to have unique attributes and general attributes. So, for example, form, the nature of form, the unique attribute of form is one of it is that it's something that is capable of being damaged. The forms, physical things are things that physically come in contact with one another and damage one another. In that sense, is the idea of being one of the essential qualities of what rupa means. So it comes from the word, say rupyate iti rupa, and that word rupyate comes almost like the English word rip, which means to tear apart. It means that form is something that can be physically damaged. So it's saying that form, in a relative sense, exhibits that quality, and then as a general attribute, all form also has the general attributes of being impermanent, as not being associated with the real self. Those are considered the rangi tsenyi and chi tsenyi. So saying conventionally they have those qualities, however, those qualities do not exist by way of some real essential quality. So when saying they lack any essential quality, it means they lack any real essential quality. So that same description goes through with all the other 6 remaining of those 8 attributes. So that's one point, is that denying that the relative truth quality, which is kind of the conventional teaching of Buddhism, is one that is not valid from the point of view of ultimate truth, and it lacks those relative truth qualities in an ultimate sense. So that's what those 8 formulations are explicitly asserted. Then there's another way of interpreting them, which is according to what is called the doors to liberation. Nambar tarbe go. Then it means that it's a classic formulation that refers to then a way of meditating. It means a way of meditating that gives you access to liberation, is what doors to liberation means. So there are 3 of them. There's called, one of them is called the door to liberation of signlessness. The second one is called the door to liberation of emptiness, same term, emptiness. Not originally, because this formulation is also used in Hinayana Buddhism, which does not really give a lot of emphasis to the doctrine of emptiness, as the Mahayana understands it, but they use the word emptiness. And then the third door to liberation is usually translated as wishlessness. Wishlessness in the sense of that when we gain this understanding, we will not have a sense of wanting something. It's kind of having an attachment to the idea of something that is desirable. So, for example, in the very kind of simplistic way of Buddhist practice, the most fundamental spiritual attitude is that we should seek to achieve a favorable rebirth, and the way to achieve a favorable rebirth in a future life is by practicing good karma, and avoiding bad karma. And so the idea of achieving a favorable rebirth, nevertheless, albeit in samsara, is put out as a desirable goal, something that we ought to aspire to. So if we have a limited attitude and we think of that as something really important that we really want, then that's something that we wish for. So that's from a higher point of view, that's not something that ultimately should be wished for. We should have a sense of detachment. We should think of freeing ourselves completely from all of samsara and lose that kind of attitude of wanting something. That's kind of the very basic meaning of it. So these 8 are divided into those 3 kinds of doors to liberation the following way. The first one, the one that says all dharmas are emptiness, that's identified as the door to liberation of emptiness in the Mahayana sense of emptiness. Then the next 5, that is no essential attribute, no arising, no real passing away, no real quality of being impure, no real quality of being free of impurity. Those 5 are identified with the door to liberation of signlessness. Signlessness means referring to some kind of real attribute that relates to those particular qualities of, say, thinking of samsara as something that's impure. That is an attribute of samsara. Just thinking of nirvana as being pure, that's an attribute of nirvana. So saying nirvana doesn't possess the quality of being a state of purity in an ultimate sense. So it lacks that kind of attribute. So the sign here means attribute, signlessness. The signlessness, the door to liberation of signlessness, in the sense of understanding that nirvana itself has an ultimate nature of emptiness. So samsara itself, although impure and something that we should want to free ourselves from, nevertheless does not have a self-existent form of suffering and impurity associated with it. So those 5 qualities represent the door to liberation of signlessness. Then the last 2, that there is no diminishing, it literally means the reduction, and no reduction and no increment. And so reduction can be it can be thought of in a number of ways. The most straightforward one that's mentioned here is a reduction of the mental afflictions. So if you begin to practice the path, begin to gain some realization, then gradually you abandon the mental afflictions. You are reducing the mental afflictions that you were subject to, and then eventually when you get rid of all of them, then you attain nirvana. So there's that reduction that can be achieved, and it really is not something it's not saying there's no such thing as getting rid of your faults, but it's saying the process by which you rid yourself of faults is not a real process, and those faults are not real faults. And so there's no reduction, there's no real diminution of bad qualities in the sense of self-existent bad qualities. And the reverse of that is, if you cultivate wisdom and faith and effort and generosity and morality and patience, then those are positive qualities that you want to increase, you want to develop further. So saying there's no real, those qualities that exist conventionally and are certainly of importance and meant to be cherished and valued, but not as self-existent virtuous qualities that can be progressively increased and developed to a higher level. So it's saying that when you have attained a direct realization of emptiness, then you appreciate what those 8 formulations are saying in terms of how we understand the real implications of the ordinary world. So it's a pretty deep thing to even comprehend what those words really are saying is quite profound in all of its fullest implications. So, but anyway, those three doors to liberation is the standard way to interpret those 8 forms. Then this is considered to be a unique Mahayana way of interpreting the three doors to liberation. There is a more standard or more conventional form of the three doors to liberation, which can be explained in terms of the four essential marks of the Buddhist teaching, which is all things are impermanent. All causally produced things are impermanent. All conditioned things are impermanent. All contaminated entities are suffering. Then all dharmas are empty and free of a self. And finally, nirvana is ultimate peace. Those are the four seals of the Dharma. Then, we talk about duality. Oh yeah. So now here, take the conventional interpretation of the three doorways to liberation is that those refer to the conditioned entities. The first two are all conditioned entities are impermanent. And secondly, all contaminated entities, meaning all the things that are samsaric in nature, that are produced by the mental afflictions, and are the conditions that we experience on the basis of our mental afflictions, then those are, by definition, in the Hinayana sense of the word, that which we should abandon. Right? And given that there's something that we should abandon, therefore we should have no aspiration for them. So we should not wish for them. So the door to liberation of wishlessness, in the most basic sense, is to develop renunciation, to feel a sense of aversion for samsara. That's what the conventional interpretation of that door to liberation. Then the second one is that all dharmas are empty of a self. It means they exist as mere phenomena that occur in the case of impermanent entities that are just causally produced. And in the case of the five skandhas, are subject to, in the samsaric sense, of subject to karma and the mental afflictions, but they are not. There's no self attached with them that is controlling them or directing them in any way that we have control over or our samsaric existence. So that understanding of samsara or the fact that there is no real self is interpreted in the standard meaning as being the door to liberation of emptiness. And then finally, means nirvana is the ultimate state of peace. Then the karsa, senyumeva di karsa, kurang karsa, So when we say that nirvana is peace, nirvana itself is understood in conventional Buddhism as actually the ultimate abandonment of all of the mental afflictions. So the truth of cessation, right? The truth of cessation represents the quality of having abandoned any of the totality of all the mental afflictions that are associated with all of the three realms of samsara. And they are eliminated in a piecemeal way. So when you achieve the path of seeing, you abandon some portion of the mental afflictions and achieve some portion of the truth of cessation. Then when you cultivate the remaining portions of the path of meditation, then all the seeds of the mental afflictions that are more deeply ingrained have to be gradually eliminated as you deepen your understanding of selflessness. So that process, when it reaches its culmination and you've achieved the abandonment of all the mental afflictions, then you've achieved nirvana. And that condition is an uncaused entity. Nirvana itself is not a result, not a true result in the sense of something that is causally produced. It is itself an uncaused condition that can be attained through eliminating the seeds of the mental afflictions. And when they're irreversibly eliminated, then the state of cessation, which is in its ultimate form identified as nirvana, is achieved. So that's not any positive entity. So that lack of any defining attribute that constitutes its essence, that is the conventional way of understanding nirvana, that represents the door to liberation of signlessness. So this is a completely different way of interpreting those three doors. There are the karasa changyal shinmun na ane karasa nanta gosum de chuju shaba chuju les jawre.
我记得电视那个猪猪讲的写了去。
对。
写出来。
di karasa changyal shinmun mo ke jawati yore ti nin godele yore tetu kanga yore. So in the scriptures, especially in the Tibetan commentaries, they're taken from different sources. Some of them are found in the Tantras. Some of them are. They're actually So there are like 16 different ways to explain this so-called doctrine of the three doors to liberation. For example, one of the more straightforward interpretations is to say that from the Mahayana point of view, the fact that all entities from their true nature is that they lack any self-existence. That is identified as the door to liberation of emptiness. So that's the ultimate nature of all things. And then we take certain phenomena, right? You take the truth of the past as a cause that enables you to abandon the mental affliction. The sense of it's the essential quality that enables them to be abandoned. Or you take the mental afflictions and karma as causes that bring about, continued samsaric existence. So we think of those conditioned entities that we think of as causes, right? And then when we understand that causal aspect of them is not self-existent, they're not causal entities in the sense of having a true causal essence to them, then that is the door to liberation of signlessness. Sign, another word of, because it comes from the word nimitta. Nimitta in Sanskrit is sign, but sign can also mean cause, so a causal sign. So the sign of causality is absent from an ultimate point of view. And similarly, the way that we think of things as being results of causes. So if you create good karma, you can be reborn in a favorable rebirth in the future. If you practice generosity, you will gain wealth in a future life. If you practice patience, you will develop a beautiful form, and you'll have a large number of companions and what you call them, compatible friends. So those are results. Those are results of causes. So those those results are not self-existent results. So those qualities that can be achieved in a conventional sense are not results in a truly existent way. And that's identified as the door to liberation of wishlessness. Because the positive qualities are typically things that we aspire to or we long for. Anyway, this is a really important kind of formulation that just kind of describes how when you gain a proper understanding of the Dharma, it gives you a proper orientation, a proper perspective towards your spiritual path. You don't believe in a self. You don't have a sense of attachment for, limited kind of positive results. And you don't think of those causal qualities as being truly existent. And that kind of gives it a very favorable aspect to your attitude and your viewpoint towards your spiritual practice. So all of this comes about through having become a Mahayana Arya, through achieving direct realization of emptiness. That's actually making a very profound, statement if you understand how to interpret it. No.
Sutra, Gyuto, all the children come to get this. All the Yomanes, Kajekora, Kasura, Chini Bashimodo, but the one similar to Yomanes. That Mariba Meva, Mariba men, Mariba Seba Mevane, Mariba men, see Mariba Mevane, Mariba Seba Mevane Sita, Kashiba, Mariba Mevane, Kashiba, Mariba, and you Duce, Suba, Namshi, Shiba, Kabinso Lava, Areba, and it Areba, Soa, and it Seba, and it Siba, Siba, and it Azeba. I think about what is really the mess. She said about the American time, Marie was 7 days, and Marie was 7 days, Marie was 7 days, and Marie was never showered there, or the castle, Marie was never showered there, and then I didn't mention you should make a study Madus. No. Marie was 7 never there. Dashi makes in the double, Mariba Bevan and Dashi Jam, what I did see edition. That Mariba Seva Bevan and Dashi Seva Pablo. Those that Kaje, Lumju, Ludo, Yiga, Tede, Yana Juni, Lumju, when Pachik, Ludo, Chikshua. That issue to Ani Dunga, or Manipujo, or Lame Asian nest. Toba Lame Asian, Tala, Lame or Asian or Malis. Other Kaje, without Lankas or Pashi. Tobaya me, Madobaya me, those that I also that he never so that church, Katoya, Matoba Sun, Matoba Church, it's not Simutin, Sun Toba, and the Kayo, Matoba, and to Juji, yes. What that the village Kaje, Kaso, Namcha Ishik Simula, that Kaje, Pumuma, and the JJ Juni, come to get the Bashi, Pene and the Juni. All this that's our Shijachi, that I just Your Marista still, Casonamcha is Simula, what the Yoma is in the Tatamcha is Satangone, Sachuba Parlata, and J. A Kone Pongo 또가 혼에 혼도 더 냐고 샤면다 간지 뭐 제가 제대로 들어야 된다 간지 용어 없다.
So then after that section, the next one, the third section, is the path of meditation. The path of meditation is so the path of seeing. How does that? How say the kechima chima to your man is one. Sazobi kechima chima to your man is one. How the any how does that? Muslim to talk ne dile cheso langbek parutela any nyamsha is. Nyamsha like.
nyamsha tolam is iyo tolam. Ani kaso le namdra nama chita.
Any how does that? Chusu.
다 추수무사들 제라고 하죠.
아, 네, 가서.
근데 간지가 돌아도라.
받침멜라.
자소식 자원치 소서야 된다 지금 가지. 유류도 가리에 상담 주고 와. 자소식.
그러니까 이제 개치바 찍스요. 그러니까 가리는 유류를 사게만 하장을 것들에 가리는 주주체 있는 이는
아, 대대 가요. 맞다. 돌아도라 진짜. 돌아남도 나와요. 돌아도 가는 남자 남도 나와요.
di các con yang so I'm kind of addressing some terminology that relates to how the path unfolds. So we talked about the fact that the path of seeing is a state of meditative absorption, right? Because you have meditative absorption before you achieve the path of seeing, when you achieve shamatha and you're practicing vipassana, I think you can call that states of meditative absorption. But when you say the path of seeing, you're talking about a state of meditative absorption that is a direct realization. And in particular, it's a form of direct realization that is non-dual in nature, meaning that there's no sense of perceiver, of your mind. You have no sense of your mind is perceiving some object directly, and by the way, there you are, the observer, watching your mind perceiving nothing like that whatsoever. Rather, your mind, the awareness of emptiness, and the emptiness itself, kind of almost as if they dissolved into one another, into a state where the experience of emptiness and the emptiness itself are indistinguishable, and you are merely in that non-dual state of awareness. And when that non-dual state of awareness first occurs, then there's a phrase for that element of the path called Pache Melam. Pache Melam means that kind of wisdom has an indestructible. It has a kind of it has a kind of power that cannot be thwarted. So the power of being in that state of direct realization is such that nothing can stop it from achieving its result, which is to eradicate, to destroy some portion of the seeds of the mental afflictions and subtle obstacles to omniscience. So that's called the Pache Melam. Pache Melam literally means the path that cannot be obstructed. So that path will run its course, and nothing can sort of interrupt you and stop you from letting that realization sort of fulfill its function. Then when that path of non-interruption comes to an end, then you reach the point of the path that's called Namdrolam. Namdrolam means it's still during that state of meditative absorption, but now the obstacles have been removed. So the action of destroying those obstacles has completed, and so now you're still in a state of meditative absorption, but in such a manner that now you are free of those obstacles. So that's called the path of liberation. And all of this is going on during a state of meditative absorption. And then once that is finished, then you arise from that state of non-dual state of meditative absorption, and then it's called the post-meditative state. And the Jeta means following that state of meditative absorption. And then now you've now become an Arya, now you are an extraordinary being who's no longer subject to error in your understanding and awareness. And then there are various other spiritual activities that you cultivate that are still technically considered part of the path of seeing, right? And then, now that you've achieved that level of realization, then you have to advance it and further it. So then you prepare again to re-enter that state of meditative absorption, and when you do so, then that becomes the path of meditation, which in the Mahayana system has 10 bhumis to it, 10 stages or 10 levels of spiritual development. So here the next section is describing the form of practice that takes place during that subsequent path called the path of meditation. So then in the sutra, that the section of the sutra that is identified with the path of meditation says, starts with, therefore, O Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no conception, no formations, no consciousness. That's referring to the 5 skandhas. Then it goes on and says, there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There's no form. There's no form means there's no visible form. There's no form that's perceived with the eye. There's no sound, and that's the object of ear consciousness. There's no smell. There's no taste. There's no tangible object. There's no entities. And entities is objects that are unique objects of mind consciousness. So there's 6 so-called inner ayatanas, which start with the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Those are the inner ayatanas, that are the inner faculties that are necessary for consciousness to occur. Then the visible form, sound, smell, taste, tangible object, and entities are the outer factors, which when the outer factors interact with the inner factors of your faculties, those are the 2 main conditions that bring about the experience of awareness. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and the 6 forms of consciousness. So this is an important formulation for how the process of cognition occurs in the Buddhist formulation of the 12 so-called ayatanas or bases. So none of those exist according to the wording of the sutra. And then the next one that it says is the constituents, the dhatus. The dhatus is an interesting formulation. We could talk about what the term literally means. It has to do with a classification of entities and a continuity among those entities through cause and effect. So there are 18 such dhatus, and those 18 dhatus include the same 12 ayatanas that we referred to. So it starts off by saying there's no eye constituent, no etc. up to no mind constituent. Those are equivalent to the 6 inner ayatanas. And then it says up to there's no mind consciousness constituent. So when it says up to, it's skipping all the intervening ones. So they're saying there's no form constituent, there's no sound constituent, there's no smell constituent, there's no taste constituent, there's no tactile sensation constituent, there's no dharma constituent. Those are the objects. And then the remaining 6 are there's no eye consciousness constituent, no ear consciousness constituent, up to the last one is that there's no mind consciousness constituent. So that's this very important formulation in conventional Buddhism of the 18 dhatus. That's another Buddhist formulation and Buddhist doctrine that's important for explaining the spiritual practice and the path which the Buddha formulated. The Buddha created these ways of describing how we should understand our experience and how to introduce ways of understanding how to free ourselves and so on. Then the next formulation is the 12 limbs of dependent origination. So it says there's no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance up to there's no aging and death and no cessation of aging and death. So those are the first and the last of the 12 limbs of dependent origination. It starts with ignorance, and then it's formation, then it's consciousness, then it's the name and form, and then it's ayatanas, and then there's contact, and then there's feeling, and then there's attachment, and then there's grasping, and so on, the 12. And it ends with birth, and then the old age and death is the final. So that is one formulation of those 12 limbs, is how the wheel of samsara is perpetuated. That as long as you engage in ignorance, it's going to create karma. As long as you create karma, there's going to be rebirth. As long as you create rebirth, you're going to have a life in which you react to all the experiences that you encounter and you reaffirm your attachment. And then as a result of that, when you die, and some karma is going to determine what your next life is going to be, and on and on and on. So that's one formulation of the 12 limbs of dependent origination. And then the second formulation is in the reverse, or the formulation that puts a stop to those samsaric causes, is determination of. So if there's a cessation of ignorance, then there will be a cessation of karmic formations. If there's a cessation of karmic formations, then there'll be a cessation of rebirth and so on. So that's basically the path of how you free yourself from samsara. So that's a huge also teaching which the Buddha formulated and propagated. So here it's saying none of those formulations exist by way of a self-existent nature generally, and then in the path of meditation, it says something here that when we run through all of these, I'll explain. So after going through the 12 limbs of dependent origination, then the final kind of doctrine that's addressed is Four Noble Truths. There's no suffering, there's no origination, there's no cessation, there's no path, right? And then the last three expressions are there's no transcendent realization. There's no transcendent realization means there's no direct realization of emptiness. That is a self-existent realization. There's no attainment. Means there's no attainment of the cessation by means of those realizations. And there's no lack of attainment either. It's saying that's not to say that there's no absence of attainment. So that whole series of refutations or denials is all interpreted as in the context of the path of meditation. And the one description that is given here is just repeated for each one of them. So basically when you read the sutra, you have to know all the elements of those conventional Buddhist doctrines. You have to be familiar with them. You have to understand how they are really meant to be understood and be able to identify in your everyday experience what their importance is and appreciate them for what they are, which is an important kind of description and formulation of the nature of life, you could say. So then here it's saying, and by the way, from the point of view of the perfection of wisdom, is saying, he says here, let's just start. Let's see. Okay. Therefore, he says, therefore, Shariputra. Therefore, he says, therefore, what therefore means, right? It starts out, O Shariputra, therefore, in relation to emptiness or in emptiness. It's in the locative, right? I think, right? Yeah. So emptiness is placed in the locative case. So it's saying locative means, in this case, I think it means a locative of relation. It means in relation to emptiness. It means in relation to emptiness means here it says when the Arya, the Mahayana Arya, who is still undergoing training, has not yet achieved Buddhahood, when he or she is in a state of meditative absorption in which emptiness is being directly perceived in that non-dual manner that we described, right? In his or her awareness, in his or the field of awareness of that person, no form can be seen, no feeling can be perceived, no conceptions can be seen, and it goes down the line. So when it says there is no, in relation to emptiness, there is no form, feeling, and all of those doctrines that were identified and enumerated and given as a list almost, is saying that when you're perceiving emptiness at the level of the path of meditation, you're perceiving it directly, you're perceiving the fact that the ultimate nature of all of these doctrines is such that no relative truth quality that's associated with those doctrines is present in the field of your mind's awareness. So it's all of it is being described from the perspective of the person who is involved in the state of direct realization of emptiness during that experiential state. None of those qualities that are all of those various teachings of the 5 skandhas, ayatanas, dhatus, and so on, none of them are perceived as having any self-existent reality, and therefore none of them is present in your field of awareness. So that quality, there's a yesheki, sigmo. Sigmo means how the experiential state is being perceived in that practitioner's mind. That emptiness is being perceived in such a way that there's no element of the 5 skandhas that is present there. Their ultimate nature is such that they don't exist at that time in that experiential state. So that's something to reflect on. And it's meant to be describing how your understanding of emptiness is so comprehensive in that it encompasses all these other relative truth doctrines which the Buddha taught.
아니 전주선만은 도바메 외칠수도 단단히 본 따라는 가서 영샤 이시 스물나 숙매만에 도바메스 디반다 나고 좋아 도바메 도어답디 말 어딘 내외칠스다 변조나 영샤 이시 내가 수다 간제 대단한 양발 샤바티 때문에 다 간제 스탑 코네 배아반 다른 시 벌지 주 나서가 소는 그 같이 쉬우지 사네 소는 소조에 또지 아니 셔츠 벌은 침발라 어다 디 자는데 균대 게지만 수도 되고 있다 가서 고라 균대 바지만 수시 어디를 바로 증명차 이시 셔츠 바로 침발라 세리네 진짜 가서 침발라 떼지 내에서 어다 되는 동반이 시주의 시주 참무 방가가 원인에 떼지 내에 어다 대대대가 달라 수수 아니 셈되다 아니 지바야 배봐 어다 남자들 저희들 지바야 배봐 아니 잡아야 배봐 아니 진짜로 다른 영어의 시제 지바 가서 진짜로 아니 시도 되는 양에 되는 사제를 고맙도 그랬어 양에 되는 탈취도스 어디 다 이슈를 단단히 나가라 이슈 나서 쉬셔야 되겠어요. 단단히 시간들이 교수도 나머지도 산재 탐지자한테 가서 세신들을 때렸어요. 다들 단단히 나가라니. 다 교수도 주면 산재 탐지자 지금 다들 내가서 산재들이 실험을 하고 지금 세신을 때내 보면서 산재와 상도 마세 다 교수도 주면 산재 강한 요소 소관이 세신들을 때는 산재기 세신에서 교수도 주면 산재 탐지장 실험을 하고 지금 때내 나면 요소 산재소스
So after that section of the sutra, then the following portions are described as saying that on the basis of that kind of awareness, on the basis of that kind of meditation, in which you are perceiving in a non-dual manner the emptiness, the lack of self-existence of all of those elements of ordinary experience, as that continues to be cultivated, then you'll proceed along the various stages of the path, and then to perceiving this emptiness, to perceiving this lack of self-existence, that very practice is how you should explain, how you should define, how you should identify the practice of the perfection of wisdom. Then, 가르사, 저기서는 처음에 배출. 되지.
실로 대답하는 같이
참에 도가냥 토베
제주사는 토바 매일씩 세셔봐. 대답하면서 공부 딱 같이 소환한다 소환한다 아니 내가 소환 동반이나 아니 제가 대답하나 그때는 마세다 토바 매일 수이다 아니 이게 동반이나 수매스다 동동이 무엇이 신신 몰라 수 매만네 토바에 마동한 매가 디바다 같이 냠샤이 스물다 매가 수와 어디 나기 디네가 되나
So in this succeeding portion starts out by saying, therefore, Osharitra, because there is nothing to attain. And so that was the last element in the previous series of points that were mentioned, saying starts out with there's no form. It goes through all the rest of them and says there's no realization, there's no path, there's no attainment. So here then it's saying by virtue of the fact that there is no attainment, it says by virtue of the fact that this is the way in which you should be cultivating the perfection of wisdom, then that is how the bodhisattvas are meant to resort to rely upon, right, and abide in a state of practice that correctly conforms to how the perfection of wisdom is meant to be practiced. And then Jiva method is and 동인기들 똑신 공내 세우는 된된 제가 왜 동인이
단점체 있시다. 다들 자주디 원하는 자주 제단 원한 담아 아니 원한 도시다고 띵게지 지금 와 다들 원한 도시다고 띵게지 자주다 되들이 지금 그렇습니다. 원한 도시다고 띵게지 내 이거도 내 딱 이제 가서 보내 깨진이마다 상 띵게 되는 거라
그럼
이 시주 참고라다 남샤 제거 맞아 샤이가 이래 남샤 샤는 남샤 되는 나요인데 딱 이제 생각 지금은 다음에 시즌은 나를 때 탑도 그래 나를 같이 부르래서 해서 So then
this next statement is identified as describing how the path of meditation, which is the last, the final, the fourth of the 5 main paths. So we say 5 paths, but the 5th path itself is Buddha. So the path of meditation, which has the 10 bhumis, when you get to the final level, final portion of the 10th and final bhumi, then you're reaching the point where you're about to become enlightened. So this next statement is identified with that culminating portion of the path of meditation. So it says, therefore, because there is nothing to attain, meaning referring to all of those practices that are cultivated during the path of meditation, Bodhisattva is divided in a state that relies upon the perfection of wisdom. Thus saying, so this is the proper way to practice the perfection of wisdom. And then it says, with minds that are not obscured, right? So it means they're not obscured by error. Right? When they are perceiving the emptiness directly, their minds are not obscured. Then, with minds that are not obscured, they remain free of fear. There's no real explanation of that free of fear, except that because Chitan said the chakpa message, you are right. We say it, chakpa message. Chitan dila, social camera dila, and Tomani did Shana and Kashagi about the digging cheaper the little Marwa. No.
The double message, this is usual. That's
a message girl, remember? Over message, that the Tezo message, that message. Trashing Goyagon is.
Double message, that don't want to die as a no more, that was cottage.
Not just the current new years, so we can not condition and come out of Pangi. Condition cottage out in the giant, what channel you can do. She is in a Tezo episode. Yeah. So this is so here there's these.
She didn't tell the bumble. She didn't want some bumble, nobody day. She told the double me.
So here are these 2 phrases. It says that their minds are not obscured and they remain free of fear. So how should you understand that they are intrepid, right? They're not having any fear? So in what sense are they fearless? So I asked the question because in a very for ordinary persons, sometimes it's said about emptiness that it is inappropriate to teach emptiness to a person who is not as suitable to hear the subject. But it's so profound, it's so radical that someone might be, frightened at the thought or the prospect that things are not self-existent. But I mean they're not real. And then as a result of that, they might reject it. So that fear is, very ordinary, and not what is meant here by the bodhisattvas at this very, final stage of the path are free of fear. So then the question comes, well, what is it that they might be afraid of? It's not really that there's anything that they're afraid of. It is saying that they recognize that they are on the verge of destroying the most subtle remaining obstacles to their enlightenment. And so what it really means is that free of fear means that they go forward with a sense of complete confidence that they have the power and the ability to terminate the final remaining obstacles. So that's a kind of really moving, almost moving statement, saying their minds are not obscure. They're not subject to error whatsoever, and they are, have complete confidence in their ability to complete and achieve the final result. So it says, they remain free of fear, and then it says, passing beyond all error. Well, passing on beyond all error, that seems pretty straightforward, saying whatever remaining obstacles might still subject it to some kind of, lack of awareness about the true nature of things. Then they pass beyond that. This says, Shintu Dene. Is it Chichilola Shintu or Karsa? Yeah, Chichilola Shintu Dene. So going beyond all any remaining traces of erroneous ways of thinking, then Nyangana Devi Ta Chindo means that they reach the final attainment of non-abiding nirvana, the Buddha's form of nirvana, rather than Hinayana nirvana, then the ultimate peace of supreme enlightenment is attained. So this is this section here, starting with Oshagutra, because there's nothing to attain, and then with minds that are not obscured, they remain free of fear, passing beyond all error, they reach perfection in nirvana. Is describing how the 10th stage bodhisattva completes the path and achieves enlightenment. And then the last part is the fourth section of the main body of the sutra. The fourth section of the main body of the sutra was a reference to the Buddhas and saying that this perfection of wisdom that has been described in this manner as relates to how a bodhisattva should practice it, then the final statement is saying that all the Buddhas of the 3 times who have ever achieved enlightenment are achieving enlightenment or will ever achieve enlightenment. All of them will do so in the same way as this. All Buddhas that abide in the 3 times also attained, also have attained, are attaining, and will attain unsurpassed true and complete enlightenment through relying upon the perfection of wisdom. So that's a fairly short. No. No. Okay, so the only thing that remains left is the mantra, the Prataparamita mantra. And so let's, we're running out of time. Let's see if we can just hopefully rather briefly make reference to the main points here. So the first point that's made about the mantra is descriptions of the mantra. This is the supreme mantra. This is the mantra that terminates all suffering and so on. So those descriptive phrases are then described as then a statement about the benefits and greatness of this mantra. And then,
민주권은 대발샤가 자대수입니다. 민주권은 대발샤가 시진이 되게 아니 추니 지달 세번은 시간이 내가 인상 와 추니 지달 세번은 내가 인상 또 미로가 인상 아니 민주권 수박 말이스 어디 되게부터 내가 민주권 대발샤가 자대 제가 좀 봐도 집에 마스 어디 되지는 다시라 그러 좀 나와 내가 보지 내가 다야 타스니까 같이 이거지들 와 매번 다야 타서 나기 가지고 그래 매번 다야 타서 디다 데스 가데 수도 가서 그래 송시 세지와 가데 송시 아니 파라 가데스 파로도 송시 그러다 가데 수도 소람도 송시 가데 파라 가데 수도 가서 그래 파로도 송시 파로도 토람도 송시 파로도 송시 아니 파라상 가데 수도 야나와 파로도 원하는 송시 와 원하는 송시 아니 부디 소아스니 아니 자주 부디도 자주 와 소아 시스도 자주 마도 자주 봐 나도 송시에서 자주 시스도 어디에 와 어디다 아니 셔를 봐도 치고 어디다 나한테 엄마한테 든든히 좋아 이 따마 이거 든든히 좋아 든든히 좀 든든히 대단시라지 봐도 치고 지금 사물로 나버 자고 소화가 되는 제가 가서 그래서 바로 지가 사무를 나고 그래스 나기 엄마한테 제수 연한들이 말해 제수 연한들 주고 제나면 뒤수나 말해
Okay, so we're getting there. So then relating to the mantra, then there are these introductory sort of descriptive phrases. See, following the Tibetan, it says, it calls it the mantra of the perfection of wisdom. So it says, why is it called the mantra of the perfection of wisdom? It's called the mantra of the perfection of wisdom because it is that which carries you or transports you to the far side of the ocean of samsara. Remember, we addressed the word paramita in two ways. One is as an agent and one is as an object. So this is the agent version of paramita. It's that which takes you to the far side. Paramita means the wisdom which takes you to the far side of the ocean of samsara. Then it is a mantra of great knowledge, right? So that's Rinpoche Bungak, right? Rinpoche Bungak. It means why is it a mantra of great knowledge? It's a great knowledge because it is the knowledge which has the power to destroy ignorance and all the other mental afflictions. So great in that sense. Lana Mebengak means the unsurpassed mantra, the highest mantra, the mantra which is unsurpassed in the sense that there is no other path that is superior to this one, meaning the path of the perfection of wisdom, that will lead you to liberation. So unsurpassed path is what unsurpassed mantra means. And then the mantra which is equal to that which has no equal. So that which has no equal is the Buddha. And this mantra is the equal of the Buddha. So in that sense, is the equal of that which has no equal. And then is the mantra which quells or eliminates, puts an end to all suffering, because it has the ability to terminate suffering and all of its causes. And then it is to be known as a form of truth. So it is a mantra which should be understood as being the truth, because the way in which this knowledge, this perfection of wisdom, perceives emptiness is the true way in which reality is. So there is this nice Tibetan phrase which is saying Nangsul Netsul Mitumba. Right? Namsu means how things appear to us. Netsu means how they actually are. So ordinary experience is such that the way things appear to us is not the way they are. Namsu, Netsu, Mitumba means the two are at odds, are in conflict with one another. Things are not what they seem to be. But when you perceive emptiness, and when you perceive emptiness directly, the way in which emptiness presents itself to the direct realization of emptiness is emptiness as it truly is. And in that sense, Nansu Netsu Tumba means how your mind sees that emptiness and how that emptiness is perfectly in accord with reality. So in that sense, it is a mantra that represents the truth. And then also, Minjumba it has nothing about it that is false, is saying that when you develop this direct realization of ultimate truth, then there's no way in which that knowledge can in any way mislead you or deceive you or betray you in any manner. So these are all of the different benefits or great qualities that are associated with the mantra that gives voice to the nature of the perfection of wisdom and how it's to be practiced. So then the mantra itself, it says, how is that? Shiraki Parot Shibingak Meva. So it says, then the mantra which describes the perfection of wisdom, that is Shiraki Parot Shibingak Meva, is that, or the mantra which gives voice to the nature of the perfection of wisdom. Then Tayata means as follows. Tayata is, I don't think really the part of the mantra per se, is as follows. So the mantra which gives voice to the meaning of the perfection of wisdom is Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Gate Soha is the mantra itself. Then there are various significance to the syllable mantra. Maybe save them for another time. There's a very famous Tantra scripture which gives 7 interpretations to the meaning of Om. And then Gate Gate. These are, I believe it's correct to say that these are interpreted as being vocative. Right? In vocative means like calling out someone's name. So in this case, you're calling out to that wisdom. Gate Gate. And it says, in Tibetan it says Songshik Songshik, means go, go, or gone, gone, literally. But Gate also, there is in Sanskrit, the verb to go has a meaning of attain awareness, to Sugata, right? The Buddha's, Hatha Gata, that word Gata, it refers to the Buddha's realization, having gone to or attained that awareness. So it says, that, calling out that which has gone, it means gone where? It says, the first 2 words, Gate Gate, are the knowledge which takes you and makes you progress along the path of accumulation and the path of preparation, the first 2 that were mentioned, right? And then the next phrase is Paragate. Paragate then is how is that? Para means parol. Parol means to far, gone far, gone to the other side, gone far. Then it says parol. The far side here is not Buddhahood per se, but gone to the far side in the sense that you achieve the transcendent path of seeing. Paragate. And then Parasangate, that's even beyond that, even further than that. And Deparo means beyond that seeing path. The Samgate means fully gone over or gone beyond. is then referring to the path of meditation. It's really an invocation, which I'm almost saying, let one go beyond. Let one be able to go beyond. May one be able to reach that point. Then, so here it says sam into para. Sam, the prefix of sam in samgate is saying, is according to the commentary, saying it means in true, going to the true understanding of reality. Then bodhisoha at the end, bodhi is enlightenment. It means Buddhahood's supreme enlightenment, and soha is an invocation which indicates, which is meant to indicate, may this come to pass. Shitsu means may this succeed. Sort of a syllable that's meant to cause the power of the mantra to achieve its intended goal. Oh yeah. Then so that's a description of the mantra, and then the next Dordu. Finally, after the mantra, then it says. So then it's just kind of a concluding statement in which Avalokiteshvara says, this is how a bodhisattva and a mahasattva should train him or herself in the profound perfection of wisdom. So saying it has been described, and this is answering the original question. Saying now the question's been answered. So here it says that this final statement emphasizes the great importance of this practice. Kind of comment that so the remainder of the sutra is described in the commentary as being an expression of rejoicing, right? An expression of approval by the Buddha for the explanation which Avalokiteshvara has given. And so it says at this point, right? So this particular section is pretty straightforward. It says and then the Bhagavan, meaning the Buddha, arose from his state of one-point concentration, which was mentioned as Samonawa, that meditation upon emptiness itself. And then it says, and that's interesting because the Tibetans, it looks like he's saying, he said you've done well, and then it says, well done, well done. But in the Sanskrit, there's a phrase which says, sadhukara. Sadhukara means to give sadhukara. Sadhu means good. Sadhukara means literally means to make good. But it means an expression, the expression of being good. And then that means he spoke. So really, it's a phrase which literally means he gave his approval. So Lekso Shechawa Jine means the Buddha voiced his approval. How did he voice his approval? Then it says the words he actually said. He said Lekso, Lekso. So there's 3 Leksos, but only the Lekso are meant to be repeating what the Buddha said. The Lekso Shechawa Jine is saying the Buddha gave his approval. We would say in English. How? By saying, well done, right? Lekso, Lekso, Shechawa Jine. Then it goes on, it's pretty straightforward. It says, O son of good family, it is so. O son of good family, it is so. The profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught. All the Tathagatas rejoice. So say not only him, but all the 3 times, all the Buddhas of 3 times who are aware that you've given this discourse, they are pleased by what you've accomplished, by what you've done. So that's where this description of what this section is about as being a rejoicing, an expression of rejoicing. And then it goes on to say, and then when the Bhagavan had said this, then Shariputra, all the other Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, Avalokiteshvara, and then the entire assembly of gods, humans, and demigods and spirits were all filled with joy. They rejoiced that this discourse had taken place, and they praised what the Bhagavan had said. Jorden means the fact that the Buddha gave his seal of approval to this discourse, then everyone became very happy at that fact. And then, so that's that kind of concluding portion of the discourse itself, describing the discourse, and then the Tibetan translation, and the Sanskrit also, it has a final statement, which is this, this completes the essence of the Prajnapada Sutra on the essence of the Prajnapada Sutra, which is known as the divine mother, right? Bhagavati. Bhagavati Prajnaparamita Hridaya. Dzogso means the Samaptam, means now it's finished. So that's it. So we have a couple of minutes left. So those of you who have questions, fire away.
Some translations says form is empty, and in other form is emptiness. Could those 2 translations suggest different understandings?
Give me 1 second here. The sutra, the original Sanskrit says Rupam Shunyata. Right? It's no verb. It's an implicit is. Form is emptiness. Rupam Shunyata. So it's the word for empty would be, the adjective is shunya. Shunya. Shunyata is emptiness. The sutra uses the word emptiness. Form is emptiness. So
seeing them as two nouns
is more proper. And if you say form, yeah, well, I guess we could discuss it. But anyway, in terms of the words that are in the sutra, it's not an adjective, it's a noun.
When we spoke about free of fear, can you have an alternative interpretation of the fear of a final abandonment of a remnant of a very strong attachment? You know, when somebody has a very strong attachment to something, and they know that they're abandoning the remnant left, but it's the fear of
losing that attachment is
final, the fear of that final abandonment, something that was a very strong attachment. Could that be an interpretation of fear?
So meaning that like it would be bad if I gave up that last attachment, I don't want to give it up?
No. You want to give it up, but then such a strong attachment to that thing that such a strong dependency that the last disconnect of the last remnant of that attachment, it's like
unsettling.
Yeah, it's unsettling because you were so attached in such a strong way that so then you are free of that fear of that.
That you don't have any. No longer you have.
You don't have that fear. You may have you feel that then you can disconnect.
Takuran Java Savage Tunga. He got this cigar. That didn't similar to what matching Chapa Mass. The Chapa Mass, the Chapa the Koran number Chigua, the Koran number the Lakas, Chapa Karesena, and a Naranzo Karsa, the Jayorma. The Jati Wangi, and Naranzo Mobile Chick, Shenjachene, and the Malaya Chigiorma, Crunch Sibuare. Chesa ane seminaria not the karsa doja the get pangugayana ane kanjati yungere same sort mindawa sort yungerwa that the kapjela ane koran that karsa lam toba leve that karsa wangi ane the dergi karsa sem that mindawa tan Share sort of that could be map sort of stagger. This is a degree rescue.
I mean, the other job, no, she got no more Pajaja. She would travel the Jashana, she would travel the Jashana, she would travel the in there. Bangala, a little longer, one night, when you do Bangala, you can look at the Japa. She's not doing me with this.
Oh, yeah, so it is interesting. So, in the analysis of the whole process of the path. So there are two kinds of obstacles. One kind of obstacle is mental affliction, right? Second kind of obstacle, more subtle obstacle, are obstacles to ultimate knowledge, or obstacles that prevent you from attaining Buddhahood. So those are considered subtle obstacles, right? So, and so the Hinayana removes all of the mental afflictions, but not the other ones, right? So the Bodhisattvas, they are going to abandon both of them, right? So the path theory says that when they reach the 8th bhumi, right, then they abandon all the mental afflictions. So at that point, there will no longer be any attachment, no longer any desire. But there's still remaining the subtle obstacles to omniscience. And there are many different ways of explaining what those represent. So one of them is that they cause you to see things dualistically. Even though you know in your own, through your own experience, through your own awareness, things are not self-existent, you still have that subtle obstacle which causes things to appear to you dualistically. And so you have this, it's like knowing that you're subject to some kind of faulty perception, but you can't shake it. So that kind of state of mind still remains towards the final level of the path. So saying that the removal of that error, that final source of error, is no longer, he no longer has any concern or fear that he can't abandon it. And so he goes with great confidence to eliminate what's left.
That's the last two bhumis.
3.
The last 3.
Yeah, this
8, 9, 10.
when you reach the 8th bhumi, no more mental afflictions, only subtle obstacles to omniscience. Yes.
In the first half of the morning session, it was explained that we distinguish reaching the accumulation path by achieving bodhicitta and the preparation path with the union of Vipassana and
Shamatha, right.
Vipassana and Shamatha. So I understand on the preparation path there are 4 stages: heat, patience, excellence.
Right, correct.
So do those, is it correct to say that each one is reached with an understanding of each line? Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Or is there some other way to distinguish how you...
Oh yeah, okay. Sure. Okay. I was going to respond, but it's not my business, so Joram Joram dela ani jo temo soba chojo di merashi gares. Tedan di jo temo soba chojo di yache di dagin di kaza ning shenyu na ani samushi jorse jiora. Suktomo domini sukso domini kalsa. Sukto domini suktomo di dambu di joche di temo di So the generation, no.
So how do you distinguish?
That's the any medal carriers. The Koyache and the drug get carriers. Demo the drill devas, the demo gay, Prangi, catcher that Prangi Jorden, the Katia.
Good news, chaval. In good news, she did not so to say, as this was said, the Mabuja, or the Tanzil, or the Zuma, one day, Chabat to Tony, and it driven them near to Allah, as a similar to the driven them to me. That's very much. And she did number of sure, but she did good news that the new castle. Or the day to me to good news to you.
And then
Tamade and Jonan Jojo is Tamish. What do you think? Jonan is Tamish, Yamsha Gedani, Tonomi after.
And then Karsas. The number is Soma, Zimba, the delivery. Tokashi, the Soma, Zimba, the red.
Soma, Zimba, any tangent of Zinji Thomas. So this is
do my best to. There is a way to. I mean, the same. So there's a description of the 5 paths. That's the Hinana version of it, right? And there's a Hinana version of the path of preparation, same name, and the Hinana version of the heat and peak and forbearance and the supreme dharma, right? So that has one explanation. It doesn't have anything to do with emptiness per se. It has to do with the strength of your virtuous qualities, virtuous state. So, there's so the main qualities are faith, wisdom, effort, deva, dakasa deva, tsundru, karsa, karsa. Tom nasi deva che, shira che, jemba che, tingenzin dang, ani karsa, tsundru wa. So there are 5 main virtues, right? Faith, wisdom, recollection, energy, and what's the 5th one? One of them is wisdom. One of them is what Rinpoche said. One of them is aspiration. Anyway, there are 5, and so as you practice, those virtues become more powerful. They become stronger, and as those virtues become stronger, their ability to keep the negative qualities, mental afflictions, the motivation to carry out improper activities, the inclination for those things to become manifest in your mind become controlled. So it's called Ngawang Gyuto. Ngawang Gyuto means the manifest or overt form of the mental faults. Your ability to keep them under control becomes stronger and stronger as you progress on, as your shamatha and vipassana become more proficient. Now, in the case of the Mahayana path, there are different kinds of objects, right? The external object, the things that you see, and then there's internal objects, which is your own mind, for instance. So it's more difficult to focus. It's easier to hold in your mind the notion that external things are not self-existent. It's more difficult to introspectively experience, that is, be aware of your mental states, and then be able to associate with that experience. They are not self-existent, right? So the ability to overcome the tendency to think of external objects as self-existence is the first thing that you begin to suppress. So that's what you accomplished in the warmth. Then the second level then becomes the subjective states, your ability to think of your own mind as not being self-existent. Well, that's deeper. It takes a stronger, clearer understanding of emptiness. Then and then the latter two, there are 2 more kinds of, they're called namartopa, kind of conception, but it means the belief that things are self-existent. So it's that mental affliction that things are real. A more subtle and form of that mistaken belief is harder to control. So as you go higher in the path of preparation, your ability to control those more subtle forms of that erring mind becomes stronger. That's a short answer. Then Kisala said, this is a really complicated subject. Why don't you come to Sarah and study for a few years? And you can learn that. No, sorry. So, I think, no.
시간이 걸리다 보니 주로 찾아지와 또 가서 맨날 제레시기 나가서 자가비 지나가는 사람들보다 시간이 와다시 좀 되는데다 수비다 니고 넣으시지 시지 있으면 되는다 시지 뉘어받아 시간이고 보다 되는지 소소마 지금 가서 대신 찾아주면 대라는 소소면서 앞에서 가서 캐봐서 보다니 나도 Penisi sono io sai che c'è dus dietro ma se ce l'ha perché sta con le tue c'è penisi con la tua c'è uscito c'è su e sono un po' dove sai adesso e da sono di da sai che sono della teneta che 제보다 대화 시험 보겠어. 와. 이 유대가 계시적이 가서 무슨 대화다. 자문이 지기 따라서다 뭐게 저 답변이 출수했다 내가 지금 쉬고 지금 왔어 와다 좀 마요야 되게 마요야 되지만 미로시스 나 제가도 아니 하나만이 되는 준비 프로그램 얘기다 니 가수를 해 사마나마다 돈은 이 쉬기 체인데 내가 권한이 내가 가지 다들 주고 다들 쉬고 돈도 좀 제가 제시한 있는데 근데 그런 돈도 좀 가리 제대로 내시지 가지 냐네 가리네 와 제도야 제네 도면 잠주 없으면 까지 모두 계속 이 돈은 그런 좀 뭐야 되게 있어 근데 이만 이제들 앞에 메시 가야 가수를 시부지 가수 돈나치도 가보다 시부라고 나고 소토 채널스 그다음에
So what you want to make some final remarks about the last 2 days, the time that we spent together with this teaching event, and so basically describe that this subject matter, which began with the permission blessing for the practice of white manjushri, is very special, very holy, and can benefit us greatly to achieve greater understanding and wisdom. And then following that, starting yesterday and continuing today, we had an opportunity to review this extraordinary subject, which is Yinku, means like what do you say in English? Yinku, essence. And Yinku is it's kind of almost like a liquid, right? Kua means some kind of liquid, but Yinku means then it's some kind of it's kind of almost like thinking of it almost in a way of a nutrient, that it's a very nutritious liquid. Nectar, yeah, okay, nectar. Yeah, anyways, nectar, in other words. Anyway, it's a nice phrase. So it means, sometimes they refer to the Buddha's teaching as the Ninku refers to ghee, to butter, is a kind of Ninku, right? That like the general teaching of the Buddha is like milk. Milk is nutritious. But if you churn that milk and you extract the most essence from that milk, you get butter. And so the teaching of wisdom is like that most essential, nutritious quality, spiritually speaking. So then that is kind of a phrase to. So he's remembering things that to add to what I said, that probably would give a little more kind of oomph to what I'm saying. So anyway, what Rinpoche is kind of saying is that this is a very precious and very valuable subject matter. But what he wanted to say about it is that he's very pleased that all of you have had the good fortune and had the inclination to come here to listen to this subject. So that says something about you almost, right? It's saying, it shows some that you have some virtue and some propensity and some in Tibetan they say Geva Sangmo, right? Geva Sangmo means you're very fortunate, literally. So, but fortunate doesn't mean like lucky, like in some random way. It means fortunate. It means it's saying something about you. You're a good person, and therefore you saw fit to come here. So it's kind of in a way making that sort of comment about it. So and then he said we should, in case you don't know, that the way in which this teaching came about was actually fairly recent. Since he came to the U.S., two people in particular, Chöpil, where's Chöpil, and Anitendrol, and specifically came to Rinpoche to request the teaching. So you should take note of that, and you should appreciate that fact. And so from speaking from his own side, Rinpoche says that the subject matter that we have discussed, even during this reasonably short period of time, is something that, because of the nature of the subject matter, has been an opportunity for us to acquire significant virtue. So, Tibetans would say, immeasurable amount of virtue. And so that's a good thing. And generally when you accomplish some virtue, then of course you can expect that it will bring some kind of favorable result for you in the future. But then a real spiritual practitioner shouldn't just sort of leave it open for what that might be, and not try to ensure that the virtue that you accumulated should be directed in a way that will ensure that it brings about the most beneficial kind of result. So he said we should think about fellow sentient beings, and especially those who are suffering from famine, or suffering from conflict, war, disease, and all the misfortune that fellow beings have to endure. That we should think of them, keep them in our thoughts, and pray that our virtue should ripen in such a way that it benefits suffering beings, number one. And then number two, in recognition of the two individuals who are responsible in a way for having this event be scheduled, then it would be very appropriate for us, recognizing that they are two ordained people who are dedicated to their own spiritual goals, that we should give them some of our virtue anyway, as a joke, a lot of virtue to them, that our virtue should help their efforts, their spiritual efforts, to be successful, and that they should be able to have good opportunity to continue their studies and to improve their learning spiritual knowledge. And so with that, then Rinpoche just said that he's very happy to have had this opportunity to share this Dharma teaching with us.
소소하게 샤는 시절에 사야를 두야 대야를 가리네 가는 거 같이 간지 지금 지jan치 대체율을 때문에 딱 가서 가고 싶다 중간 나도 도서 다시 줘야니 충분히 간단하다 인가고 투지치스 내가 뭐서 아니 간지 가서 저는 미도 주시네 주된 것 로시링들아 아주 뒤에 정말 거지 대 가리네 사야를 두야를 가리네 가리 제와 이네 도서 주님의 같이 되게 제어해요. 아니 우리도 때문에 하려면 가서 우리 제수는 제야지 당연히 가디네 무슨 제야지 차기 위해서 아니 나도서 다시 조지만이 아주 뭐하고 주의 강가다. 이 답은 투지치스 그것도 있으면 쉬우스.
So and also would like to make note of the fact that Rinpoche has had the opportunity on a number of occasions, not only today, not only this visit, but for a number of years now. He has been welcomed here at DNKL, and that when he comes here, he feels he's so well treated and taken care of that he feels it's as if it's his own residence. So usually your own home, you know, it's a place where you can do what you want, and everything is available to you, and you're very comfortable and relaxed. So he has that feeling when he's here, and also, you know, over the last few years, I think 2015, 17 was it? 14. So I can't keep track of it. So especially during the 3 years when Rinpoche was the sitting abbot at Zerme, and he was coming to the U.S. Particularly, you know, on behalf of the monastery. So, you know, a lot of time during that period was spent trying to raise funds for a very important building project at the monastery. And, you know, he didn't know anybody really in this country that he could turn to, but Geshe Dargye in particular, you know, went to great lengths to help him schedule various activities and different events. And there were several monks that were accompanying them. Gelek has been here many times, right? and then also not only Geshe Dargye, but all of the you know, members of DNKL who support the center here and do work, volunteer here, make the center, you know, active. Oh, yeah. And so he mentions the secretary of the DNKL, that's Susan Altebet, has also done a lot of things that were helpful. So the point of mentioning all this is not just simply to, you know, remind everyone, but rather as he's doing this as an expression of his thanks to all these people that he has referred to from the bottom of his heart.
Here, Vishwamana prayer, and after Vishwamana prayer, we do Namrimana prayer, which don't have a text. When we start the Namrimana prayer, then we can line up to see his Rinpoche. And okay, forget to tell one thing, it's sponsored Chupo and anything to do, not just requesting, it is sponsored also the cover spaces. It's good for appreciation. Okay. And then also, Mr. don't have to thank me, as he's my teacher. Okay, now here, so please start. Okay, we're going to start now. So also, we all forget to take the art and all this stuff.
Rinpoche,